Okay, so the sock that I told you about. Okay, the sock is the warm-up exercise. Who thinks it's a green sock? Okay, reasonable. White sock? White with a green stripe? Mostly reasonable audience. Okay. How about this shell? Hold a moment, hold a moment. You have been conditioned for years, or maybe decades, to say about this is interactive shell. Let me balance this a bit with two hints. Was that a green sock? And now think about interactive web. Is it the same level of interaction, you think? So, who is for interactive shell? Okay, good. We're making progress here. Okay. Who is for non-interactive shell? Okay. And slightly interactive shell. Okay. So, that's the Unix shell, and I think we can do better today. Who am I to think about that? Well, I'm doing DevOps, and Bash, which I'm using for a long time, is one of my main tools, so I got an opinion about that. So first, how we got this situation here. Shells are using very old communication paradigm, which is sending text and receiving text back. When I was tracing it back in history, I had to stop somewhere. So that would be the telegraph. We had telegraph, which had a key. It was not very ergonomic, so teleprinter, multiple keys, and instead of listening to beep, 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 beep from the other side, it would just print it on the printer that you have. And whatever you were typing on your end would come out of their printer. Then computers came along, somebody connected this thing to a computer, you would type in the commands, and when the answer was ready, it would come out of the printer. Well, the next logical evolutional step would be to replace the paper with a screen. The issue here is that this screen was acting as if it was paper, meaning that if you need to display more text, it would come at the bottom, and everything else would be scrolled up, eventually out of the view. And then we had a breakthrough. These devices started supporting cursor movement. So that potentially means that you can make actually interactive program, which would use the whole screen for your interaction. When do you think this happened? 71 till 75 sometime? No, okay. 76, 80? 81, 85? Amazing how many of you were wrong. Okay, so 74, 75 somewhere. So I'm saying it's a turning point, so let's see how it was implemented, for example, in text editing. So text editing became what we know today about text editing. You go to the point in text that you want to edit, and you edit it just there. Instead of what we had before on the left side, you would type the commands to edit the text. How this turning point manifested in shells? It didn't until this day. So what we have is a screen which is mostly non-interactive. This big part of the screen where you have the outputs of programs is non-interactive. It's treated as paper. It doesn't use any of these later facilities. And what I'm saying, let's get up with 1976 and make this part interactive. How that could look like? Well, you have interactive objects on the screen. You navigate to them with, let's say, keyboard arrows or tab or your mouse, and you interact with them, somewhat like on the web. The shell will have track of all this metadata behind these objects and would allow plugins to do the real work with the objects. So each plugin could come up with particular commands that it implements for these types of objects. Very important thing in this kind of interface is to have semantic recording of the interaction. What do I mean by that? Let's take, for example, you have a list of EC2 instances on your screen. And you have now just turned off, terminated an instance. This instance has ID of 1, 2, 3. And you interacted with that instance. You didn't. You interacted with an instance that had a particular name, was a result of particular CI/CD pipeline, or maybe it was recently launched, the most recently launched, or some combination. So recording your interaction as interaction with instance 1, 2, 3 doesn't help you tomorrow when you try to replay that and it's another ID. So you need to know what actually happened. So the shell will be guessing it, hopefully correctly most of the time, and if the guess was wrong, you can edit the interaction record and explain to the shell what actually happened. How am I supposed to do that? I'm going for what many feel is a sacred cow. That's actually parsing outputs of the programs that the shell runs. Yes, the shell would parse the outputs. And the most common argument would be, the shell is not supposed to do that. Don't get into semantics, which I think is an invalid argument, because the shell is already in semantics. First of all, for exit codes, because it needs to know if the program failed and to do some error handling. So it's semantically conveying what happened in the program, if it was OK or an error. And another very valued feature of the shell is command line completion, and it does exactly that. It understands the semantics of the arguments. And that's what making you productive with the shell, because it understands. So I don't know why people draw the line exactly right there just before parsing the output. So if you know, come and talk to me, explain me why this red line is going right there before parsing the output. Another common argument would be, but that's too much work. But then again, same scale as command line completion, and part of the work is already done with JC. JC knows about many programs and then can parse their outputs and converts them to JSON. Another interesting, let's say, concept of such a UI would be objects of interest. For example, if you have created a CI/CD pipeline, it makes sense that you would like to know when it's running. Or if the rules were wrong that decided that this object is object of interest, you modify the rules. Another use case would be if, for example, you have a CI/CD pipeline which just failed, and you start your shell, maybe you want to investigate what happened. So objects of interest in failed state would be automatically shown when you start the shell. So to summarize the vision for such an interface, which you might not call Unix shell after that, but the ideas are interactive objects on the screen, catching up with 9076, as opposed to, let's say, fish shell, which catches up with 90s. I'm catching up with 76. And you need to capture as much of the semantics of this interaction as you possibly can. It will assist you when you are replaying the whole thing tomorrow. By the way, one of the most prominent use cases would be navigating between cloud resources. For example, from your CI/CD pipeline to ECS logs, it's a few clicks, which you're doing like stupid every time. You could record that and use that recording. So if these ideas are resonating with you, you could join the project, which is now implementing them. That's next generation shell. As a shell, it has two parts. There's a programming language and the user interface. The programming language is in good shape. We use it at work. And the user interface, you're welcome to help building that. Or wait another maybe 5 years or so. On the back, can you scan the QR code, or you need a bigger one? OK, no. So, OK, I guess we have like a few more minutes. And that's why we have a bonus slide. So what I'm suggesting here, green sock with the green stripe. People like the green stripe, like really like it. They can't imagine their life without that. But actually, what I'm suggesting is to combine the good parts of the web and of the CLI. Take the powerful aspect of the CLI and also make it easy like the web. So this, I think, that's how you make this talk memorable. It's one of the bizarre ways to represent architecture. So bottom, the core of the language is C. Then everything else above that is next generation shell, except for the UI frontend. There should be two UI frontends. one for the web, one for the terminal. I'm working on the web. That would be a piece of JavaScript. Everything else would be the NGS itself, NGS, the language. About JC that I mentioned earlier. When you parse something and you have JSON output, I think it's pretty ergonomic to use NGS for working with that, while your regular response would be to use JQ with that. I encourage you to try NGS because it's more ergonomic in many of the cases. Thank you.